Hello again, everyone. Welcome to this third session of the last day of Peralta Online Equity Conference. I'm so happy we still have so many audience in the room, and I'm so happy you're not tired yet. So that's amazing. So before we begin, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, so if you don't want to be seen in the recording, feel free to turn off your webcam throughout the session. And please keep your microphones muted unless you're invited to speak. And please share your questions in the chat. We're gonna forward your questions to our speaker at the very end. And we are using closed caption features, so you can activate them by clicking on the Show Captions or CC Live Transcript button in the bottom bar. And if not visible, click More to find it. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Kristen Everhart, and she will be talking about reimagining assessment, equitable grading, and labor-based grade contracts. Kristen, microphone is yours.
Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to share with you everything that I've been learning about equitable grading practices over the last really 2 years, and then focused on redesigning all of my courses in the last year and a half. And so I'm hoping that today you leave with some real tangibles to be able to test this out, whether it's an entire course design or it's a single assignment redesign. I want to make sure that you have that you're equipped with something that you're confident using at the end. So I might blow through some of this kind of quickly because I want to make sure that we get to that building component of this workshop. Um, Raise your hands if you have heard of labor-based grading before. So I kind of know where I'm starting. Nice. Okay, a few of you. That's great. Um, So some of you might actually already be implementing some labor-based grading practices, and that'll be really exciting when we get to kind of that implementation part that you realize, oh, if I just tilted this a little bit more and changed the description around a little or my mindset on it, this is an easy labor-based um, application. So that's what we're doing today. We're examining equitable. There are a lot of different approaches to equitable grading. The one that I held on to is labor-based grading contracts, and that's what I'll focus on. So my name is Kristen Everhart. I got my PhD from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and my master's degree in communication at San Diego State University. I believe that labor-based grading can work for all different disciplines. I obviously have experience applying it in humanities, but I've also helped and consulted with other people who have wanted to apply it to like math and sciences too. And it's been working really well for them. So it can apply across different disciplines. Ultimately, the goal really is to help encourage us to examine and rethink our practices that come to grading and how that supports all, or how we can support all learners. Not everybody is coming to the classroom in the same place, right? That is what the equity conversation is about. But how do we give everybody that same access to success and learning? And how do we achieve deep and engaged learning? So I was part of a cohort at Miramar called Create, Culturally Responsive and Equitable and Accessible Teaching Educators. And they covered a lot of ground. We went over selecting different course material, assignment design, and approaches to grading. And it was the approaches to grading that I really decided to dig into. And I've seen a big success or a big change in my retention and my success data for my students. And it also shifted the mindset of my students in my classroom from like, how do I get a good grade to how do I learn this material, which I think is really the goal of everybody, of every teacher, right? How do I get my students to actually be interested in learning and a little bit less focused on the grade, which is the result of them learning, hopefully. So, really wanting to get students to initiate and be active agents in their learning is what motivated me to make this shift. And I am really satisfied with the choices that I've made. So, hopefully, I can inspire some of you to take the risk as well. So, understanding traditional grading and a little bit of the challenges with that traditional grading points-based approach. The problem with traditional grading is that it's perpetuating inequities that have started in primary education, right? And then we're carrying them on into secondary education. I teach at the community college level. I also teach at universities and local colleges, and I can say that I see the same inequities having that impact. Doesn't matter if it's community colleges or universities, it's at both. So there's also a hyper focus on the final product. Are we going to get the A? Are we going to get the B? Did we get an 88? Did we get a 92? So it emphasizes like error-free final work. What did they get? What did they earn on that assignment? And it disadvantages marginalized students in that way. And then calling out a need for fairer assessment. So shifting assessment practices to prioritize effort and growth. How are we honoring that growth? And how are we recognizing that everyone's coming in at a different starting point, right? That some have been disadvantaged in the past and they're going to need more support. They're not in the same place as some other students. So that's an issue that traditional grading practices aren't addressing. Whereas labor-based grading shifts that focus to honor the additional labor and effort that students are putting in. So you're evaluating effort over final product. It's about that journey that they went through, right? Offering revisions and really more collaborative learning to help close those gaps. And then honoring persistence that they've completed their revisions and not just looking at that final outcome. There's equity in assessment by recognizing diverse, like linguistic and educational backgrounds, promoting that fairness in grading. What were their experience in high school? And I also teach in a high school breakout program, and I'm finding that a lot of the high school educators are starting to transition to labor-based grading. So when I introduce this concept and this grading approach to my students at the high schools, it's not foreign to them, and it really takes kind of a level of stress off of them that they weren't expecting in their college class, right? And then it also creates a more collaborative learning environment. This is kind of a pro and a con because it really does put extra time on in your lap, right? That you are having to work with these students a little bit more, but that's also what we want, right? Like how many of us have office hours where students aren't just coming into our office hours or asking for the help that we wish that they were. And they will begin to do that when you're using the labor-based grading approach. So uh, basic principles of labor-based grading, the core principles on whatever changes you should kind of think about these as guiding principles when you're making changes to an assignment or redesigning your course, is really refocusing the description of your assignments and the description of how those are like in your rubrics and stuff, that they're focused on effort and engagement over the traditional like dominant standards, think checkbox rubric. This is 1 point, this is 2 point, this is 3 point, right? You're going through and you're revising that language to be effort forward and engagement forward, authenticity, sincere effort, that kind of stuff. Transparency in the expectations. So making sure that your grading contracts are really clear because it doesn't come down to points. It really needs to detail and describe what that labor is so that students understand, and then the expectations to help them understand that assessment criteria, which I do through labor logs and reflections. So students actually are picking their contract and then they are self-assessing based off of the contract criteria that I've given them, whether they're meeting those demands or not. The third is student agency. So in those reflection logs, for example, it is the student selecting the contract that they want, and I am helping them get to that contract, but ultimately it is on them. And then I am making sure that they understand that criteria and just helping to close that gap. So that's their agency in getting to choose. And some of them choose the B contract. Some of them choose the C contract. That's up to them, right? You can't inspire all of them to get A's, and that's not the necessarily the goal. The goal is to help them decide what their learning path is, and then help them fulfill their learning path that they've chosen. And then growth orientation, so offering multiple revisions, reflections, promoting continuous improvement in student work. right? So collectively, all of these principles help to support a more inclusive and student-centered approach to grading, to assessment. Okay, so implementation details and how I've implemented it. And then I kind of created it into like a formula because I feel like a lot of people that I talked to who wanted to do labor-based grading or still want to do it just felt overwhelmed and didn't really know where to start with everything. So I'll provide you kind of with the little kit at the toolkit at the end. But for my grading contract overview, I have assignment variety and scope. So there's 38 assignments, including, and I'm using my public speaking class just for example, including speeches. I have SmartBook activities. I have weekly engagements in my online class and in my in-person classes. There's peer feedback components, and then there's the individual reflections and labor logs that they have. Grading is based off of effort. It's a combination of effort, timeliness, completion, revision. If they get a revised resubmit, and then it's not fixed points, so I've removed all of the points, encouraging continuous improvement. For instructor feedback and revisions, everything is like growth minded and growth forward. So I really focus in generally on the 2 or 3 things that I really want students to walk away from that assignment having a clear understanding of or having demonstrated learning in some way. And all some of the other like little things, I kind of let them go, right? So really deciding and going in and thinking, what is it that I wanted students to take away from this assignment? What are the major revisions so that we're not like just picking out a bunch of little things for revisions. And then I ask students sometimes if they're major to meet with me before they begin their revisions so that we're not revising again and again and again and again, right? You're required to have a meeting. We go over the revisions, make sure that you understand it, and then we set and agree on an achievable date for you to submit that revision again, what works for your schedule. For speeches, I require it to be revised and resubmitted prior to the next speech because every speech is supposed to build on itself. So they have to turn it in prior to that. And that keeps them on target with their grading contract. And then a holistic grading structure. I'll show you how I've built a narrative based using emojis grading structure instead of all the individual points that I used to have on my rubrics. How grades are earned in the class. So there is still A, B, and C. That's a big difference from ungrading. Doesn't have any letters or labels or points at all. The labor-based grading still does align with what's going to show and what I have to submit to the registrar. And that was a decision that part of my decision in going between ungrading and labor-based grading and what I was comfortable with. So the A contract expectations really emphasize that work is turned in on time or even early, so then I can look at it before the due date passes and we can avoid any potential revisions. Active participation, full task completion, and then thoughtful reflection for top grades, really looking for that sincere effort from students. B contract is your baseline. It involves completing all of the major assignments. For transfer credit, they have to have a minimum of 3 speeches, and there are certain, outcomes that we need to meet. So I kind of use that for the criteria of the baseline, and that they still have heavy engagement. 80% of their smart books are completed and necessary revisions. And I think the attendance or participation part on that one is at 70 or 80%. So it still kind of aligns with that 80%. A is at 90% and C is at the 70%. So C contract includes completing speeches, partial smart book tasks and engagement, minimal revisions for acceptable performance. And then for D and F, it's just consequences for non-completion, right? So if you have too many things that you never completed in the class, and mostly I'm in Canvas really looking instead of the points total. You're like, what do you look at if you're not looking at points in the class? All of the assignments can be categorized so that it goes along with your contract, and then it gives a percentage of completion. And so I'm looking at percentage of completion when entering the final contracts instead of the point column. Here is what my old table used to look like with all of the points and percentages. And then I would have rubrics for each one of these, right? And each rubric was like, oh, 4 points for this, and 5 points for this, and 1 point for the transition. And they were really point heavy. Now it's whether they met, right, excelled, exceeded kind of language instead of the points. Here is what it looks like now. So number of assignments in each category that they completed. For the speeches, I've now put it into elevator, story, and persuasive being all the three major speeches, and they have to complete 100% of those. Not necessarily at A, B, or C level. They just need to complete all three of them to pass the class. Were they turn in on time? So this is that persistence component in labor-based grading. And then was it accepted or are there revisions required? Did they complete the revisions? So I give them this table to kind of help keep track of where they are in the class. And then these are what the contracts look like. So each one kind of builds. That's why I go in this direction. The C contracts, to pass the class, you need to finish all three speeches, and that's a transfer requirement. Like I said, I set that as the baseline. They don't all have to be completed at an A level expectation, but they do need to be completed to pass. 70% of the smart book readings are completed, 70% of weekly engagement activities. So if they just don't feel like it that week, they don't need to participate in that one as long as you get to 70%. Labor logs are submitted but inconsistent. So really, I need one labor log from a C student telling me I'm a C student. I'm going with the C contract. That's what I have time for this semester. And they usually include some kind of justification. I'm taking too many classes, or I'm doing classes and I'm working. And so I'm going to be really happy if I get a C in this class, and that's what I'm going to work on. And it gives them freedom to manage their schedule a little bit more. And I emphasize like no judgment. If a C is where you are, you need to honestly assess the other commitments that you have going on in your life when you fill out this contract, right? And then I have attendance and participation because of that real heavy emphasis on timeliness and consistent participation. So students don't just think, oh, in the last 2 weeks of class, I can revise and resubmit everything, and all of a sudden move up to an A contract, right? That's not what we want to see happen. And then here's an example um, of my narrative-based grading that I built in Canvas, because Canvas, that's what we work on at Miramar College. I'm also on Brightspace at another place and a couple other LMSs, and a lot of them are really centered around points, right? We have a total column, and that's how they evaluate everything. So Canvas luckily lets us go in. It's still limited, but it lets you go in and make your own grading scheme. And so I've got the letter grades here, and I just put in the midpoint really for everyone. If it's A, it's 95. If it's B, it's 85. If it's C, it's 75. So it just gets the like complete. That's it. In ungrading, in full ungrading, I've also seen that some people, and also in labor-based, they move to levels instead, level one, two, three, four. So I chose to do emojis and stay consistent because in Canvas, then it lets me look at those percentage of completion columns. Equity and student impact. So what I was really hoping for here um, is that students would come back more focused on effort and growth instead of anxiety over points and what was their grade going to be at the end of the class, right? So every assignment had that, well, what's my grade on this assignment? And what does that mean for what my grade is in the class? Um, Also, supporting more diverse challenges, especially in public speaking, there's that presentation component, right? We're not all going to be TED Talkers at the end of things. So, how can I value the growth from where the students started in the semester to where they ended up? And where can we maybe set up some revisions or expectations that fall within that improvement, like recognizing that improvement and growth, right? Overall, my student experiences and the feedback that I've gotten is one, it increased their confidence in the ability. They're sitting there, they're thinking, oh, this is a public speaking class. I'm horrible at speaking. I'm sure to fail. They reported that they felt really confident, that even if they struggled with the material and it was difficult, that they had a reasonable chance to pass the class. And really encouraging, I saw them take more risks and more chances with their speeches, maybe choosing a different attention getter or a topic that might be a little bit more difficult to research. So that was really exciting, and I hadn't seen that previously. Encouraging that risk taking. Again, they took on more challenging topics or work and assignments. They chose to challenge themselves in certain ways that instead of having to play it safe. Collaborative learning, so peer feedback was more consistent and more supportive between students. I also opened up more peer review on instead of all revise and resubmit, having peer review ahead of time on assignments, and then flexible and supportive. So they felt that it really helped them meet the demands of their schedule better and be able to work the class around that. They had more engaged learning. I had more early submissions than I've had before, less students waiting till the last minute, but I also reinforced that by going and looking at those early submissions and getting them feedback to make changes. Students reported feeling in control of their progress. On their way out of the classroom at the end of the class, I met with every student. In the smaller classes, that's possible. Some of my larger lectures, like 60, that doesn't work out. We have a conversation on their reflection and their self-reflection and labor logs. But in the smaller classes, I can get them on the way out and say, okay, do you know where you are in this class with your contract? And are you comfortable with that contract? And they said yes. And this is where I learned like I'm good with the C. I decided on a C a long time ago because of X, Y, and Z. Yes, I fulfilled C contract. And I didn't have any emails to round grades or any emails for extra credit because we don't need extra credit when we can go back and revise and work through the good material that was already designed to fulfill the class and help them learn and grow, right? And then less anxiety about that A or passing the class. So that was immediate things that I noticed. And the changes in my data, I noticed after about 3 semesters, really started to see that kind of pick up momentum. So, considerations and challenges. In that chaos, I soared. The first semester, I would say the first 2 semesters that I did it, I felt like I had lost my structure, right? When you change all your rubrics and you're not talking about points anymore, and you have students deciding kind of where they're going to end up, and everything becomes much more of a conversation. It felt, at least for me, uh, a little unfamiliar and new. Probably what it felt like when I first started teaching, right? And I forget that after almost 15 years of being in the classroom. But this was really kind of pulled the rug out from under me. What are we doing? How is this going to end out? This fun experiment was exciting. Um, Challenges and considerations. So I did have a couple of students that were a little bit resistant. They preferred the traditional point system. And by a couple, I mean like 2 or 3. They were comfortable with the traditional system, and the traditional system allowed them to complete just the major assignments and not do any of the what they called busy work. And I said, well, in the busy work is the learning and the growth and the persistence and the effort, right? That helps to make your big assignments great. And having those like being able to be a TED Talk speaker and just get up and speak doesn't necessarily mean that the other content on listening or ethics of presentations and all of that stuff is actually being learned. So they didn't like that they couldn't cut corners on some of the assignments that they didn't want to do and still get their A. Number 2, the importance of communication, explaining your rationales and the importance of the assignments and helping students understand that new grading approach if they're not familiar with it, so that they understand what their agency is and that they're comfortable along the way. So kind of those quarterly check-ins throughout your semester. And it gets a little bit more difficult when I teach the short term, like a 6-week class or an 8-week class, because then you're doing almost a self-reflection or labor log grade assessment contract assessment every other week. But at the same time, those are conversations that I wanted students to be having, right? Where I'm not the one that's pursuing them to say, hey, you're at risk of failing this class. They are self-assessing. And sometimes it's wrong if they're like, I'm an A contract. And I said, right now, you're at a C contract. So we're not on the same page. Let's talk and figure out how to get you there. And then manageable tracking tools, so logs and checklists being simple and manageable and avoiding burdening students and instructors during grading. So I created that labor log table where they put in the date and they put in the activity and the amount of time. I also love reading their any concerns or challenges column, and it really does feel like I'm having a conversation with each student, but it takes time. So here's where we get to the workshop part. And here's where we can do breakout rooms to discuss maybe if we could do three people in each breakout room is kind of what I thought. But the challenge would be I don't know that we have time for everybody in the group to redesign one activity. So if the group could identify one activity collectively and and work together to redefine it, pick one assignment off one of your syllabi from any of your courses so that full credit is based clearly on labor and that it includes an opportunity for revision somewhere in that assignment. Here's the full instructions. And I can put this in the chat. If I put it in the chat, will the breakout room still have access to the chat?
Yes. So if you share it now, they will. But if you share it after they go to breakout rooms, they won't be able to see.
Okay.
So it's a
So
good point.
I have the assignment cards and the reflection prompts that I can put in the chat right now. The workshop challenge instructions I don't have. Mm-mm. Oh, hold on. It's a direct message. Okay. So I just put the assignment cards and reflection prompts in the chat. The idea is to pick that one assignment from one of your syllabuses, use the assignment cards to help you. You can either entirely replace it or you can support that assignment with some minor revisions. And then use the reflection prompts to help you clarify the labor expectations and equity goals for that assignment. And then be prepared to share one redesign idea. I'm hoping we get to share out when we come back. If we have a few groups that are excited to share out. So here's what the cards look like. And these are cards that I came up with. There's other options out there, right? But it emphasizes those principles we talked on early on. So heavy on revision. Then there's assignments that are emphasizing frequency, and then there are assignments that are emphasizing completion. So, for example, if you have a major writing assignment in one of your classes, maybe you choose to make that a draft and revision memo style assignment or a draft and revision cycle assignment where they have building blocks and they work along through each section. So the major assignments where I'm working with students and I'm working on revisions, those are the ones I want to make sure they're really important and they're hammering home key essentials for the class. Frequency assignments would be like discussion contributions, if you have, low stakes discussion question responses once a week or something, a weekly writing. In one of my classes, I have a journal. It's an individual journal that they write to just informal responses, applying concepts to their personal relationships. And then weekly engagement activities are also usually low stakes, right? In my points-based class, they were like 5 points. So that would be really on frequency and making sure that they're consistently participating throughout the semester. And then completion assignments are like the labor contract menu, if they get to pick from something. So these are just three key categories that I kind of created that align with the principles of labor-based grading to help you have some shortcuts on redesigning one assignment and or going ahead and redesigning your whole course, right? So for me, I picked like one from the revision category. I have one from frequency or two from frequency and one from completion is the way that I redesigned my course. Do we have questions? Oh, and then I included these reflection prompts so that you can make sure that this hopefully will help you confirm that you're aligning the new assignment with labor-based grading a little bit more, right? To help clarify for students, then what is the goal if it's not points. All right, do we have questions before we go into the breakout room? I've done this workshop in person before, not online. So if it's not translating, the same.
We have two questions in the chat, but I'm not sure if you want to address it at the very end or later. Milena and Christopher asked questions about the contracts.
Oh, what happens if a student chooses an A but doesn't meet? Do they default to a B? So yes, during that reflection log assignment, they would say, "Hey, I'm an A student," and there's questions on there that say, "Here is all the parts of the A contract. Where have you met those expectations?" And they usually aren't completing that section of their labor log. So I'll say you're missing the answer on 2B, where you are showing what you've actually done to be aligned with A, and we're not on the same page. That's just what I say. We're not on the same page. We need to meet. Right now, I have you on B contract because of X, Y, and Z. And if they pick C contract, then they move up to B. And I get to say too, I disagree with you. Currently on your trajectory, you're on B contract. So if you don't lose steam, you're going to be on the B contract. Yeah.
And the breakout rooms are ready.
Perfect.
If you want me to open them all, maybe do you think 8 minutes would be enough?
Yeah, I think so for to revise one assignment from someone's syllabus.
Yeah, perfect.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. I got pulled out of that first group pretty quickly or in the middle of the conversation, but I was able to pop into to both groups, and it sounds like you are feeling pretty confident with the revisions that you made. Is anybody able to share out an assignment, maybe using the reflection prompts, right? The assignment used to reward this, and then you decided you could revise it to reward effort or frequency. I want to hear some of whether these were helpful or not, this exercise. Should we start with, I don't want to call out groups by number, or how did group one do? How did group two do?
Well, I'll just say for the group I was in, we didn't get to any assignment editing. We were just talking more holistically about contract grading, about what experiences we've had, what concerns we have. So that's where our conversation was. So
Okay, good. That's okay. Maybe if we don't have revisions to share out, then we can use the time for kind of Q&A. James.
I have a quick, we were starting a conversation before the breakout room ended, and you began talking about the 50% floor as it relates to sort of the no zeros philosophy. Were you going to expand on that more?
Well, it's another approach to equitable grading practice, right? Or trying to make grading practice more equitable is that no zero approach. And the 50% floor model says even if a student doesn't turn anything in on an assignment, that they get 50% of the points of that assignment. So they've still essentially failed it at 50%, but they don't have a zero in the grade book. And the idea is that it lets them be able to recover in the class a little bit more. And I can't speak to all the ideas behind the 50% floor model because it's not the one that I went down the rabbit hole with. I liked the more, uh, I like the heavier focus on intrinsic led learning versus extrinsic focus on points, right? Um, and I have resources actually. I should put my resources up for kind of where I found most of my inspiration. Can I share screen again? A part of the screen. Portion of the screen. Okay. Here's some of my resources there. It is Bloom that talks about that intrinsic versus extrinsic and what happens when we involve points in grading. And we frame our conversation around points. Sorry, Zoom is. There we go. What that does with students' motivation and focus and their the outcome that we're looking for, right? So the 50% floor model and zero, not having zeros in the grade book are still centered around the points focus. So psychologically, Bloom would say that you're not tapping into growth, timeliness, and that like revise, resubmit kind of learning as a process still.
And Dr. Everhart, we are a little bit over time, but I would like to also address Anna's question in the chat. Um,
And I
I,
don't want to end on that because I'm not hating on other equity-based grading practices for sure. There's ungrading is a whole nother thing. And um, I think 50%, I think any efforts that you're making to get away from that traditional grading structure is great. Sorry to cut you off. Question in the chat.
yes, and after that, maybe we can quickly finish. I have a question about how the final grade gets evaluated. Can you share the grade rubric for an A if there are no points or grades? That is a question from Anna.
I'm not logged into my Canvas right now, but if you want to see more of the structure of my course, email me. We can Zoom and we can walk through the development shelf for it. That way you can see how each one is set up, right? So some are complete, incomplete, and then others have that um, the emoji part to it. And then for assignments that just have categories, like for me, I'm teaching speech. So I have intro, conclusion, main point one, main point two, main point three, and then presentation and delivery aspects of it. And then three categories, right? Did they excel, meet, and or not? And where would they need to revise?
Thank you, Dr. Everhart, for this practical session. Thank you very much. I believe many of us are leaving with at least one concrete idea, whether it's rethinking an assignment, revising how you communicate expectations, or experimenting with a contract-based approach, which was a brilliant idea that you can bring into our own teaching. And thank you again. Our next session will be starting in 8 minutes, but I see some hands up. Discussion is still going on, so I'm happy to keep this room open so that you can continue. But if you would like to log off and join the other session, you're welcome to do so as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.